already number one realtor.
Yes.
Try different wines.
What's your favorite wine? Red or white? Hold on, first. Okay, all right.
I'm sophisticated.
I think a part of me was just like, y'all, we've been great. You're just now figuring it out, but we've been great. That's who we are. It's in our DNA.
So like in my Colossus Deadpool, like impersonation, 1 or 2 moments, right? It's
And I'm sitting there in my head going, I wonder if I can somehow sniff the traffic going from the armband. It's got to be talking to an API or something.
to the next cocktail, to the next conversation.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the C3 podcast. You guys know what it is, Cocktails, Code, and Conversation. And it's your host, David Lee. And as you guys always know, we have another special guest because I tell y'all all the guests that I have on this podcast are special. It's how we get down. But this one, man, look, I'm going to tell you guys right now, this conversation is going to be a little different because it's going to be good. We're going to hit into some topics. Me and this gentleman, we had the pleasure of just linking up. You got to love the internet nowadays, right? Twitter is a place where everybody link up. But him and I got together. We were in a Twitter space together, and I loved his passion and what he was talking about. We linked up on some very similar passions that we've been talking off and on here for the past couple of months. And so just getting ready for this pod. So without further ado, I am so pleased to introduce to the C3 squad, Mr. Jon Logan. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Love what you're doing here. And just a pleasure to be here. Ready to dive in, dig deep, and uncover.
Yeah, absolutely. So C3 squad members, some of you know, some of you don't know. So one of my biggest things, one of my biggest passions, right? We look at On the Corner Media Group, Ebony, Ascent, what we launched and the things that we're talking about. And what I have been doing for the past, 5 to 6 years is really working with, minorities, specifically the African-American community on financial literacy, right? I think it's one of the biggest things that affects our community because it's just lack of knowledge. My people perish for lack of understanding. And so when I started to dive into this, years ago, it just hit me hard, right? With how much I saw in my community that we just didn't understand how finances work, even from a simple personal finance of budgeting, but even to the bigger aspects of how the financial system works and how systemically it'll be used against you, right? If you don't understand these things and how it works. And so we can go back into all the history of it. I don't even get into debates anymore of oh, this is that or whatever. Like you can go back and look at the history. It's been noted. It's been done. Like we see what it is. And so as John and I linked up, we jumped in on this Twitter space talking about, just Bitcoin and, the kind of DeFi movement. And I just love the space that he was in and what they were talking about. And so I quickly hit him up on the DMs. I was like, bro, we got to connect, man. We got to connect and talk about this because this is some of the things. These are some of the conversations that I want to make sure, a lot of our people are having. And so, with that, John, just real quick, man, give the people just a little bit of your background, what you got going on with Bank Black USA, and then into some of the crypto stuff.
Yeah, man. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to come kind of unpack some of these things. So, yeah, like how you said, we were on a conversation talking about economics and talking about finance and talking about a lot of things, talking about monetary policy, and so. Some of the things I've been involved with over the last couple of years, an organization that I've co-founded called the Cowrie Initiative, COWRIE, Cooperative Wealth Reinvestment and Empowerment. It speaks to a lot of the things that you just mentioned, talking about financial, and talks about a lot of what I think, a lot of what my co-founders believe needs to be uncovered. Nothing that's really new, but things that need to be uncovered and explained. And the history really needs to be explored so that we can find out how we got to where we are now and how we can move on and do better. And so out of Cowrie, which is the not-for-profit, in 2016, we formed our first initiative under the umbrella of Cowrie called Bank Black USA. And what Bank Black USA is a building upon a larger Bank Black movement that started after a series of police shootings in the Black community back in 2016. And kind of unofficial, I would say, spokesperson for that movement being Killer Mike from Run the Jewel, him calling on people to open up bank accounts at Black-owned banks. But really, that wasn't really anything really new. We could go back and talk about Dr. King way back April 3rd, 1968. He was down in Tennessee. He was speaking to the sanitation workers there and helping them out with a movement down there. And he made a clarion call in one of his last speeches, if not the very last speech, where he asked all the people down there to move their money out of the downtown bank into Tri-State Bank, which was a Black-owned bank at that time. And what that was a clarion call for was them to do something very active. and that was to move their money, to help them understand the power of their consumer dollars and help them to reinvest their money back into institutions that were laser beam focused on helping them get loan products and the like that will help them advance their communities and to reinvest their money back into their community. The very next day, April 4th, 1968, we all know Dr. King was assassinated in Tennessee.
Right.
So this is nothing new as far as moving your money, understanding the financial fitness of the institutions in which you're putting your money is critical, and understanding the inequities in that not all finance, not all economics are created equal.
Right.
Not everyone gets access to loans equally across the board. And the reasonings for that are not as clear cut, or it's not all good, I would like to say. But mainly what we've been doing at Bank Like USA under the Carry Initiative is we're not trying to tell a bleeding heart emotional story. What we're doing is we're taking facts from the federal government and we're putting it all in one place for people to see, so people can understand what's been happening over the course of history. This is not our data. This is the data that's out there by the federal government that shows that who's getting loans, who and how these loans are disseminated across demographics, across the U.S. And so the data shows that Black-owned banks particularly loan at higher rates to low-income communities and African-American communities. And that is critical to understand when, in fact, according to the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, these banks, these big that are all over the United States, in a neighborhood near you, they're not meeting their report card, if you will. They're not meeting their Reinvestment Act responsibilities to the local communities in which they exist. And so that's critical to understand, in that if you go to one of these big four banks, you're likely to be denied based upon where you live. And
Right.
that's a fail. That's a huge fail, because as we know, this is not our data that we're putting out through an organization. This is the United States government data that shows the tremendous wealth gap. And so we're just trying to highlight these things, put it in a digestible format for people to understand, and then have conversations. We believe, the Carry Initiative, we believe that the best disinfectant is sunlight. And so we're going to expose this thing. We're gaining tremendous traction, and it's been a hell of a ride. And so, we're not stopping. We're working on some tremendous things right now with the National Bankers Association, which is very, very powerful. We're building out a report and a team, a workforce, if you will, a task force, if you will, of millennials. More to come on that, because that's going to be very powerful as we move forward to get some of this information out. So that's a little bit about what I've been doing and about what we've been doing as an organization, and it promises to be very exciting moving forward to uncover a couple of things.
And that's so powerful, especially when it comes down to data, right? It's not about, it's not about standing on a soapbox and to your point, like bleeding heart, oh, this is unfair, this is unfair, this is unfair. You do that through saying, here's the data, right? Here's the facts, that it's not me thinking that it's unfair, right? This is not me feeling like it's unfair. Here are the actual facts and the data points is showing you that it is unfair, that there's a systemic problem and how this is handled. Now we can get on that soapbox, and that message goes so much further, because not only does it resonate with the people who just understand and know what that's like, but it resonates with anybody who can look at it. Like you can just look at the data and see there. And one thing that I want to, dive into real quick and click on is the importance of this is is to make sure that people, there's so much to unpack with finance. And I promise, C3 Squad and people are listening, like we won't go into all the deep stuff about it, because I don't want you guys to I don't want your eyes rolling back and oh my God.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to understand. But here's the basis part. And you've probably heard this a lot. Number one, understand this. When you put your money in the bank and you go check your account balance, that money's not actually there.
That's right.
The moment you take your money to a bank, they then turn around and lend it out, right? That's the reason why they charge you fees when you overdraft your account, because they are counting on your money to go turn around and give to somebody else and borrow, because they need to make $5 for every dollar that you put in, right? And then they turn around and say, okay, we'll give you 2 cents of that. That's a different story, right? The interest that you get on that is that, right? Because when you understand the basis of a loan and debt service, which is you are paying for the right to use somebody else's money when you go get a loan. That's what that is. Well, the bank is doing that all the time. And what they're paying you is in proportion to what they're getting back from it. So understand that. And so why is that important? Because where you bank and where you send your money is important, because if you're about like, I want to make sure that my community and where I'm at is taking advantage of all this, then you want to put your money into a bank to where in that community members can get access to those loans and they can use that money. Right. And so that's the fundamental thing that I want to make sure people step away from this is just remember, when you go put your money in the bank, it's not staying there. When you check your balance, you look at your card, or however you do it, right? Right. When you log into your app and you see that balance, that's not actually there. That's a promise from that bank saying that, hey, this is how much you gave me. And I promise when you need it, I'll give it to you. But they've already loaned it out and it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're talking about fractional reserve banking, and this is what you're talking about. So, Abe, I love what you're doing here, because financial literacy is not something that is, I'd say, common knowledge. It's not something that's taught in our public education school systems, and I think that's at our demise. And we see the effects of that every day. We're taught to be consumers instead of producers, and so. I'm learning as well. I wasn't taught this growing up, and so through the, I'd say, network effects, you come to realize that, man, I'm chasing money. I'm chasing it hard. I'm just trying to stay alive here. And I think a lot of Americans, by the tens of thousands, if not millions of Americans, and throughout the world, what we're doing is we're chasing income. We're trying in a way to earn more income, and that is a rat race, if you will, that's never ending. And so, how can we come to obtain assets, things that are going to hold value better? How are we going to lower our time preference, where we hold on longer to things that actually have value, and that change of behavior? And what does that behavior look like? A lot of what you're talking about is monetary policy. And it's not something that's taught in the mainstream. And if you come into wealth, by way of your family, it's a lot easier for you it's a lot easier for you to hold on to wealth going down the line. And so if you're born into debt, on the contrary, it's going to take a long time for you to start having this healthy relationship with money. Which brings me into another thought, kind of, everyone thinks they understand money, but really they really don't. And a lot of things that you described, Dave, is really what people really need to understand, and how the bank works and what they're really actually doing. We all have a relationship with money, whether good, bad, or indifferent, but yet we don't really know how it works. And even so, myself, recently, I'm beginning to understand, as I become to understand what Bitcoin is and how it differs from fiat US dollars and other nation money, other money throughout the world, and how it works with the central banking system. You're basically giving you're working, right? And you're trading your time. You're trading that for fiat, right? But then the government has free will to print money and to deal with it how they like through their banking systems, through their central banking systems, to create more money, lend it out at will to support its agency to no end. And that's very dangerous. And that deficit spending that they continually do really does a terrible thing as far as inflation to people who are really trying to get ahead. Just one quick example. If someone's trying to save up to buy let's just say a $200,000 house, and they have to save $50,000 to get there. Well, the time it takes them to save $50,000, that house that they are trying to acquire is already probably 2, 3, 4, 5x up in price. And so, this is a game really that people at very high levels, at executive levels on the federal government, they understand this very well. And so this train of thought, this modern monetary theory that they have as far as spending and what will make the economy better is all from a school and a train of thought. And those of us who know something better, we do better. Those of us who come in to understand what Bitcoin is as an open network, as an open monetary policy based in hard money, or like some people like to get into the somewhat of an Austrian school of economic train of thought. We understand that, we need hard money, hard in that it's hard to reproduce and it's deflationary over time, and that less and less flow is flowing into the economy over time. These are very basic concepts that will help you begin to understand why our money is in such a poor state as it is right now, why we're chasing it, why people have behavior like after the Friday after Thanksgiving, why people are sleeping outside on the street corner waiting to buy cheap plastic garbage that doesn't hold any value. Why are people doing these things? You and I both heard over time people saying, "Oh man, I work hard. I'm going to spend it. I'm going to get it now," and that is a result of people realizing that their money is not worth much. Subconsciously, they're just trying to get as much as they can as quickly as they can, because they realize that their money is not holding any value, or rather they don't realize it, but they see it, they feel it every day, that what they're chasing, it's going to be too much. And I got to get it now. And that now behavior is dangerous. And the people at high levels understand this.
Yeah.
And so there's something better. And I'm just trying to share that with people by helping them, educate them as to what's going on with their money, the financial institutions in which they're putting their money into, helping them understand that, and helping them understand that there's something new, there's something better, that works better, that humanity has never seen. And so I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to help people understand what that is, to get them out of this rat race, and to try to, because this dramatic wealth kind of far ends. There's ultra rich, there's ultra poor. And these helping people establish some type of generational wealth, I think is critical. And so, I just love what you're doing. These conversations are necessary.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of key points that you hit on, and I want to give, for people listening to this, watching it, I should have gave you a warning in the beginning. Look, there's going to be a lot of homework coming out from this podcast, and I would encourage all of you to go do some. So I put up some definition earlier, fiat money, like go look at what that is. Also, for those of you who are Hamilton fans, right? There's, if you've ever watched the Hamilton mixtape, if you've watched the Broadway, you listen to it, right? There's an undercurrent there that's missed. It's very important to today's conversation, other than just being entertaining, is that Alexander Hamilton was the father of the monetary system that we have in place right now, right? And there's a joke in there that the gentleman that plays David Diggs, who plays Thomas Jefferson, makes in there, is that that Hamilton did such a good job of putting the system that he couldn't undo it because he didn't even understand it, right? And so it's a little dig. You don't really see it much in there, but go back, study Alexander Hamilton, research some of the things of what he put together for this monetary system, because it still kind of flows from that. And to your point, John, there's a lot of monetary policy in there, and just how they view, how they viewed money in general and how it would work, still affects today. And what I'll do is just give, very simple, when you look at fiat money in this concept, is that at one point, and I know people probably heard this in little pieces, but I'm going to dig on it, the paper that we get, that's money, right? Yeah. Which in this day and age, very few people I actually have $1. Here we go. And I usually never have cash.
You have paper money, Dave? What is this paper money you speak of?
Exactly, right? But so this thing right here, right? This paper was really you consider a receipt, right? So back in the old days,
promissory note,
it's a monetary note. So I would go to the bank and I would take, say this is a thing of gold that I found. I would take this gold nugget. I go take it to the bank. They say, okay, great. I'm gonna take this gold nugget. Now I got gold. I have an asset. I have something that's worth something. And the bank would tell me, man, this is, this thing right here is worth, $5, $10, whatever the heck it was. It was some monetary value. Yeah. And so what they said was, okay, well, when I want to go spend it, right, I can't keep going back to the bank and lugging this gold, and then I give you this, John, or okay, you're telling me it's this worth. Let me shave off a nugget and give it to you. It's kind of inconvenient. So I just go to the bank, and the bank issues me these little notes, these receipts, right? So when I come to you, John, and be like, hey, John, man, I want to buy some sheep or whatever. Then I say, look, you're like, well, you got to give me something. We're bartering and trading. Well, how much? And we're negotiating. So I say, I'm going to give you this note that says, if you take this note to the bank, they will give you the equivalent value of however many things of gold that this worth. This is how it all started, people. And so when you say fiat money, what happened is this got disconnected from the actual reserve of the gold. And now it's just printed. It's literally worthless, right? It's just this paper that gets printed out. It's worth something because we've been taught that this is worth something. It's kind of backed by the US. We won't get into all that. But the point is, they can print this and say, here's the denomination value. But this used to be tied to something. That's no longer the case, right? Yeah. So as soon as it becomes that, you start to get into all the problems with inflation. You start to get into the policy of it when they print money, supply and demand, how you put that into there. There's a lot of economic stuff. And I promise you guys, we'll get into some of it, but not super heavy. If you want to know more about it, obviously, I'll give you some resources. I'll put them into the links where you guys can go research some of that. But so I want to at least get some basic understandings as we dive into some of the more the deeper things of this conversation. Is just keep that in mind, right? Anytime that you want to trade for something, there's got to be something that says, what's the base value of it? We used to have that when the dollar was backed by gold. It no longer is, and so now it's printed. And so you're basically now depending on the word of an organization saying this is worth what it's worth, right?
It's so where you, David, you're speaking about Bretton Woods. You're speaking, and I hope folks dive into what Bretton Woods is, that agreement. And you're speaking about what a unit of account actually is and what it means. And I think the metaphor, that analogy that you just provided, I thought was awesome, because everyone can relate to that. Everyone can relate to them taking their paper notes to some place and exchanging something for it, whether they're doing it actually with paper notes, which is rare nowadays, or whether they're doing it with some type of plastic debit card, or they're doing it rather with some credit card. But these systems, these payment rails, are set up in a way that they are very central. They are absolutely centralized. They're absolutely controlled, and they can be absolutely censored. And if anything happens, you could be absolutely locked out of a monetary system based upon whatever the government seems fit to do to you at whatever time. And so this is something that we don't want. We don't want people to be at the whim of the government. And why don't we want that? Well, we know what that looks like over time. And although we don't like to talk about it, I have to talk about it. We all have to talk about the legacy of what has happened and how we got here. Why do we have these tremendous differences in who's wealthy in this country? Why do we have these tremendous differences of net worths of a Black family versus a white family? Why do we have this? Well, we have to dig back, and we have to look at what has happened and what has caused it. Not in an effort to stay in the past, not in an effort to, maybe some of your listeners be, oh, he's pulling the race card again. Listen, it is what it is. I'm not here to be salty about it. I'm here to learn and to do better. I consider myself winning. I consider myself to be privileged, and I consider myself one that, I don't want to hold on to this knowledge by myself. I want to pass it on to someone else to help them change their behavior so that they too can win. So in order to do that, we got to have these courageous conversations. And so this is the beginning of it. And so it may sound nerdy a little bit. And Dave, I don't know how you're going to do it. Maybe you're going to have an in-depth course on breaking down this stuff. But because people are not getting this in school,
right? And
so for them to understand exactly what you just talked about, as far as the note versus being attached to gold, you used to be able to go to the bank and trade and get back that gold. And now you had something, it was backed, the money, the paper was actually, it was backed by something physical, some type of bearer type of asset, and that no longer exists. And, we have to do something better. And in 2009, 2008, there was something that evolved that was better. And I believe that thing that I'm speaking of is Bitcoin. And so,
so let's go ahead and let's transition and jump in and just, we'll do it. We'll go up to level 200, right? So we'll keep it level 200 for the people that's following. We'll do some fundamentals in 200, and it's for even me, right? I want people to understand, and John, I love that you said this a couple of times. Look, as we talk about this and we're going back and forth, we're all learning, right?
That's right.
It's just people are on different paths. Either you've been learning it a little bit longer than other people. So as you're listening to this, you got questions, things like that. Please, reach out. At the end of this, you'll have John's contact information. You guys know how to reach him. But this is we want to make sure you guys are having these conversations, asking these questions. So yeah, let's dig into it, man. Because I think the whole everything with Bitcoin and crypto, where it's gone, has really opened up huge avenues for people. And as people are really starting to understand it, it truly is going to have an effect. And we're already starting to see it have a big effect just on the overall global economy. But as we go forward, I think it's going to change the way we look at finance.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, so Bitcoin starts out as a strange curiosity about this internet technology, this internet money, and birthed out of a cypherpunk or computer, kind of very computer nerd. I don't want to offend anyone, but like a cypherpunk, very reserved bunch of people into computers and to engineering and technology and privacy. And then after a while, when you start doing some research, because everyone's heard about Bitcoin, but they don't really know too much about it. After a while, you're like, man, I got to really start figuring out what this is, because it seems like it's worth a lot of money. So, let me find out what it is. And if you really do your homework, what you really begin to do is you really start to have conversations about economics, about monetary policy, and about money and how it works. And so what happens is you start, after you really do your homework, you start realizing that Bitcoin is not to be used in the same breath, in the same space with crypto or with, these other projects, as I call them. because the properties in which Bitcoin was built, and the reason why it was built for very different reasons than, let's say, the other big market cap project with Ethereum.
Right.
And so people are like, oh, Ethereum's been good to me. But Ethereum is not created to do what Bitcoin was created to do. And so, but people sometimes can't get their minds outside of them earning fiat. People want to make fiat. People are still chasing money. And so Bitcoin is not a get rich quick scam or a scheme or a project or a pyramid. Bitcoin is an opportunity for people to be part of something, whereby to be part of an economy, to be part of the ability to own property that no one else can censor you from. No intermediate can prevent you from using or limit you, or you have to go through. Bitcoin was created, Bitcoin, the little b, was created as a money that could be used peer-to-peer, whereby I don't have to go through anyone to give me the permission to use this thing. And other projects, and this is very important, folks, I really want the listeners to really be able to understand this. There are different properties. And if you read the Bitcoin white paper, the breakdown of what Bitcoin is, right there in the first paragraph, it kind of breaks down later down on into a couple pages in, it does get a little bit technical. But in the first few pages, you will begin to understand what this thing is and how it relates to other projects. But here's the thing, and I'll just kind of stop with this. Unfortunately, people are just becoming into understanding what money is. And so there are people basically just coming into getting into money, trying to get off the ground floor. And then now you're trying to introduce them to something brand different. Groups of people are going to adopt at different rates. And that's because of their relationship with money. And so this is very, very important to understand in the conversation that we get into when it comes to Bitcoin and the value proposition that it provides for different groups of people. And I've been into, early on, I've been into many different conversations, sometimes debate about, why do we talk about the different groups and how people are suffering? Why don't we just try to educate them on Bitcoin? I'm like, bro, different people are not just going to, and the people that, Bitcoin solves everything. Well, it may in time. But based upon your relationship with money and relationship with finance, there are a lot of disenfranchisement with people who don't trust banks for good reason. Okay? People who don't trust anything that they can't physically touch for good reason. Because in the Black community, Africans, descendants of slaves, we've had our property seized because of laws that didn't allow us to have the legal counsel to protect our property. We've had our property taken from us by the federal government, by the U.S. government. And this is an example of that has Manhattan Beach over in California. And now the legislature over there and the executive, governor and that, they are recognizing and giving the property back to these folks, these African people, descendants of slaves, their families. They're giving the property back because they realize that the level of value that has been taken from the Black community over the years by the federal government, just to be quite frank, just wasn't right. It just wasn't fair to do that. So we have to really look at the value proposition of what Bitcoin does, how it levels the playing field, how it steadies the economic goalpost, because it has moved, right? For certain people who are allowed to have loans, you come home. My uncle came home from the Vietnam War, and he was not allowed to get the same type of loan product that some of his white buddies coming home from the Vietnam War was allowed to get. And that's just the fact of the matter. So what does that mean? What is the legacy effect of that? Someone who can get a federally insured home loan and one that has to get some other different type of product. What does that mean? It means that I'll never own any equity in my home. And we know this, the ownership of a single family home has been one of the greatest ways to create generational wealth in a family. And so where does that put us? That puts us at very wide wealth disparity.
Yeah,
so,
and I want to make some connections really quickly for the audience, right, as you guys follow, right? So if you look at, fundamentally, right, so Bitcoin, peer-to-peer, peer-to-peer transformation of an asset, right? So a way digitally for me and John to exchange something. I'm going to go back to the example we used, right? And it's, me and John have something that we want to exchange and there's a value on it, right? So we got to figure out how to do that. Now, if we look at some of the issues we say where this is modern day now, right? So we're not trading gold nuggets for sheep or oil or whatever you want to call it. Probably, but it's something literally in today's day and age in digital that we want to exchange. But there's some real issues, right? Like not everybody can get access to bank, right? Not everybody has a bank account because for a bunch of different reasons, right? So it's like, okay, I want to be able to exchange this thing, but it's the same thing. So I have something that I can prove that is mine, or that I own, that I can control. And then John and I work out whatever the price is, and then we want to exchange that peer to peer. We want to make that easier. To we're also, from the kind of diving into the tech side of it, I can authenticate and know that this is John, and John knows that this is me, and then we can switch forward. And that's literally
without any third party, without anyone having that's
exactly there it is. He was going right to us without a third party. This is literally between me and John. So if you guys are watching this right now, right, what you see is these two little boxes, right? This is literally like me doing like this and reaching over into John's box, and we just exchanged it. Boom, and that's it, right? We've exchanged it. There was no third party involved. We said we decided on a price. I gave it him. He authenticated it was me. I know that's him. We exchanged it, and there it is. And when you think about that, you say, well, that sounds really freaking simple. I was like, okay, it does. But when you think about that, think about how you would do that today, right? Yes. There is so many barriers to, like, if you don't have the traditional banking system account. And I know a lot of people who, like, there is still a wide amount of people. And one of the issues is as we all progress in society, right? Sometimes we tend to forget what it's like where we came from, right? There's a lot of people who go to work every day, right? They get their checks. They still get their paper checks, and they have to go cash them somewhere. And they go to
you're right. On it. I was just about to give this example. You know, a lot of people. It's important to talk about, because you mentioned before, and I could maybe hear some of your listeners, if you will, start saying, oh, how can you not have a bank account? Just go get a bank. Listen, folks, due to many different reasons, medical conditions, homelessness, one could go without being able to have a bank account. And it's very, very easy to happen. Just because it hasn't happened to you, it's not a problem to you. You're privileged. Doesn't mean just because it doesn't happen to you, it's not a problem to you. Doesn't mean it's not a problem for many others. And so how do we make the world a better place? How do we make an inclusive economy, make things work for everyone? And we could do this with this new asset class. And so not everyone has access. Not everyone can get at it. And so we have to be able to provide that. We have to be, and listen, the people who understand what's going on, they know this. They know that there's barriers. And so, like you said, you could cross the tracks, if you will, in a certain community, and all of a sudden there are no banks. And this is something that we talk about within the Cowrie Initiative and with Bank Black USA. There are what we call banking deserts, right? There are people who are unbanked or underbanked, and they're in other, what we call third world. I don't really like that term, but in other countries where we're not so privileged here, like in the U.S., there are millions of people who are unbanked completely, not able to enter into their nation state's economy. And so what that looks like practically, like how you were about to say, Dave, is like, that looks like someone having like these payday lender places where people have to take their paper check, and tremendous value is extracted from their check, fees by way of fees and that. And that's a lot. We're talking about the Western Unions of the world, where people who are trying to send payments from person to person. And that's maybe a 5 to 7 business or maybe 10-day settlement time, and with tremendous fees coming off the top of that. So this is right. This is a tremendous value extraction from particular communities that have been disadvantaged in a way that's been engineered. And so let's not, this is going to be a difficult conversation for many people to hear, David. And I think it's a necessary conversation. And I'm willing, and I'll say this, I'm willing to debate respectfully with anyone who wants to come to the table and engage and talk about history and the legacy effects of that and how that affects us here and now. I want to put that out there for maybe a future, anyone who's feeling pretty chesty about trying to disprove any of the things that we're talking about here. Right. But not all communities. You go to some communities, you cross the tracks, if you will, and every corner you got a barbershop or a hair salon. You have a liquor store, a storefront, church, and a bodega, and a Chinese food restaurant on every block. But there are no banks. Right. There's payday lenders. There's Western Unions. There are no grocery stores. So why do we have this? We have this because we had a system of redlining in place that kept certain communities extracted from being able to have in these things. And what does that look like? That looks like the federal government literally draw lines on a map and said, this community you cannot land because these areas are risky. And this was all done through zoning. This is all done through legal. And so we have transitioning back to a happier place. We have Bitcoin now, but it's still not going to be readily adopted. And so this peer-to-peer, wonderful, open, permissionless network, monetary network that we have, it could work. but it's going to take some adoption. And I'm here to talk about those disparities, because we can't talk about the freedom that Bitcoin provides
Right.
without talking about the lack thereof of freedom that a lot of communities have not been able to have due to the engineered, structured systems that are put in place to prevent that. And all I'm saying is that we got to look at that, understand it so we don't repeat it, and look to empower those people who have been in those spaces so that we can move them forward. That's how real adoption is going to happen. That's how the political power, the political strength is going to happen, is by empowering what I like to say the least of these. So I think that's important to say.
Yeah, so let's jump into that, right? And I realize that as God, there's so much stuff, bro. Like, hey, every time we talk about this, man, we just like, man, it's like, and so trying to get concise and trying to get some stuff, not really necessarily concise, but just trying to get through some good key topics. And I want to let all the C3 Squad members, like Jon and I look, I'm a big fan of what he's doing. Bank Black USA, big fan of that. I need to get more about the Acquire initiative, but him and I are going to continue to collaborate on some stuff. There's going to be more things like that we put out there so you guys can get as much as you want in this. We won't be able to get to all of it, but let's talk about like adoption and what that takes. So we talked a little bit about in the space where we met, right? Is like, I do see the potential for it, especially for the unbanked, and for those that doesn't think like this is not even just a US problem. This is a worldwide problem. There are entire countries where majority of their populations don't have bank accounts. They have no access to be able to do that, right? I was like, so this type of movement creates, like I said, that's how it affects globally how the economy could change, right? Yeah. You made this interesting statement, like we'd like to say third world countries. I was like, and I don't really like that term either, because I'm like, look, a quote unquote third world country with something like this, with the power that Bitcoin provides, the ability to pull in an entire population of unbanked. Yeah. Now all of a sudden they're able to, just because they're unbanked, let me say this as well. Just because they're unbanked doesn't mean they don't have assets or access to capital. They do, right? They're just not able to put in the bank. So they've been kind of doing what they need to do. Now all of a sudden you pull them into the economy. You pull them into their ability to take things and then start to, transfer and move funds across. Like now all of a sudden, who you thought was a third world and really didn't have all of a sudden this capital, 80% more of them come in and now they have access to it. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, they've got a lot of capital they can do. Like it starts to change some things, right? Yes. But so before I go from that, let's talk about adoption, right? So what would it take, right? A lot of people hear about it, but let's say we're going to fast forward and say, look, people understand what Bitcoin is. They have it. Yeah. Now that I have it and I'm getting access to it, right? The big thing I say is, well, most of these same people are like, well, that's great, but I can't buy no groceries with it. I can't put gas in my car in it. I can't, you know what I mean? So let's talk about some of those roads and what it's going to take to kind of get there so people can start to.
Yeah. So thank you for redirecting us, because, me and you talk and we really go in. So thank you for kind of reeling us back in. So thank you for that. So what is it going to take for me? I know right away, that's an easy answer. It's education. That's what it's going to take, really. And so let's start talking about education first. Money needs to be taught. We're taught to be consumers and not producers. We're taught to go to school, get a job, work most of our lives in debt, get sick, and then die. That's pretty much the course of action for many of us who have a 30-year mortgage, who the only asset that we ever hopefully get to own is a single-family home. And so that's not enough. That's not enough to create wealth generationally, at least. It could be, but it's not enough if we're really going to do better and have more people enter in. So we got to start teaching people in school about money and what that money means and how money actually works, what it means when how to create passive income, what it means to actually put your money into a bank, what that bank actually is doing with your money, and to kind of, in essence, become the bank, to be able to do what the bank does with the money that you earn, with the whatever service that you provide. I always speak to and about my mother-in-law, who came here from the Dominican Republic, who worked hard, who was able to own not one but a couple of hair salons, own the buildings, and then employ people. That looks a lot different than someone coming here and working for other people, getting a job and never owning anything. That looks a lot, because once you own an asset, you could borrow against that. And once you could borrow against that, you could buy more assets and you could leverage that. And I think, for me at least, before I kind of really step back and try to understand what money is, and I'm still learning, right? I used to be very scared to death about debt. But the fact is, wealthy people are in tremendous debt. They have tons of debt. But how are they leveraging that debt to buy more assets to create passive income? That's the key, I think. And so I'm learning that, and I'm speaking to and putting myself in rooms and spaces with people who are a lot more intelligent than I am, so I could be quiet and listen. So number one is going to be education about how all of that works. Number two is going to be legislation. The laws that are in effect right now that really prevent this economy from being, I'd say, lack of a better way to put it, open source or inclusive, that's a good word, is not there. And we know it's not there, okay? So we have to really understand legislation. People got to get more civically engaged. And so that will open up the room, if you will, for letting more people into this economy. And so let me just explain what that might look like. So, you know, legislation is the key to everything. Everything happens, everything's political. You know, if you don't do politics, politics essentially are going to do you. And so we have to get to a point where the legislation allows us to be able to, and you know, and if you're in a Bitcoiner, you know, you don't want to wait for legislation to allow you to do anything, right? Because, you know, you want to be kind of sovereign. And so the fact of the matter is, once people get into legislation, once they become a legislator or a lawmaker, right, an elected official, there's a fine line they have to walk. And that fine line is to protect the government in which they are trying to serve, or to protect the people in which they have been voted in through a process of democracy, to protect their interests, the people that they're supposed to represent. There's a very fine line, because, you know, the government can't collapse, because then there's going to be anarchy, right? But Bitcoiners and people who want self-sovereignty, they're not concerned with the government structures. They're concerned with themselves and themselves trying to get ahead. Okay, so this is a dangerous walk. And so legislation has to be in a way where it's truly representative, to where it gives people the access. And just don't, you know, as we say in Bitcoin, don't trust me, just verify. The laws have not always been inclusive to allow whole groups, everyone, to be included in this economic system. And so those two things, education and legislation, have to be adjusted. They have to be weighed out so that everyone could be included in this thing. So, I mean, education, financially literate, and then legislation to support people coming in to this economy and businesses to scale, so that things can happen in a more inclusive way. So
and we're gonna take a quick break, and we're gonna come back, and we're gonna dig into one more topic. And of course, you guys know we're gonna end with the world famous last sip question. But real quick break, and we'll be back, and we'll get into all that.
Hey, what's going on, C3 Squad? Hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. Look, I love talking about finance. You're going to see that with the rest of this pod as me and John nerd out about it. But I wanted to take this time to let you know about our Moneyish blog on ebonyascent.com. So head over to ebonyascent.com right now. Click on the Moneyish link, and you will be transported right here to this blog, where you'll get articles breaking down all these things from personal finance, right? The latest one is about the journey to financial freedom, gives you a nice little game plan of how you can start planning out what you want to do to make sure that you're financially free. And there's going to be more information coming here. I love talking about this stuff. I want to make sure that you have a good understanding of it. If there's topics that you want to hear about, reach out to us. Let us know. Let me know. We'll get these articles written. But here is where you can go to get up to speed on all the things personal finance. So ebonyascent.com, Moneyish blog. For now, let's get back to the pod.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Before we took our break, you were talking about education, legislation, obviously the lawmakers, you know, being able to get that there, so we can kind of get to see, so general people can kind of get to see the true adoption of Bitcoin. And I want people to do this, right? As you go through this, right? There was a lot to unpack. I'm just going to be real. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to Bitcoin. And we talked a lot about, you know, monetary policy and all these things. And for people listening, it's like, oh, but what does this got to do with Bitcoin? It's like, you really do need to understand that, so you can truly understand the difference of what, you know, something like Bitcoin is and what it means and goes through there. But taking it down to, like, you know, like a simple example of, like, all right, so if one of the things I think needs to be there is what you see right now from a lot of your banks, you have FDIC insured, right? Like, in a general kind of process of how you go about, you know, getting access or claiming to your money if something were to happen, right? And right now with Bitcoin, it's kind of based on decentralization and kind of being able to, I'm not going to dip into the blockchain technology, but I'll give you guys a general, like, very, very high level, right? It's built on that for a distributed ledger. So that way, like, the more people that are involved, you can verify something is there, right? There really is no central source that says this is it. It's basically group, right? So imagine if I took a puzzle piece, 1,000 puzzle piece, and I gave it to 1,000 people, right? with those 1,000 people, I know that like I can talk to John. John has a piece, and so he can verify that he's got this piece. And if we look at everything, we can say, okay, with a strong sense, we know that this is the whole puzzle piece, right? So if you kind of think of it that way, that gives you a little bit about blockchain. But we'll get into that later. Having said all of that, right? What's something that people today, if they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, I love this conversation, I want to hear more about it. Like, where can I go to kind of get the next step of what I can do to kind of dig into this?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. In fact, that's a lot of what we talk about at Bank Black USA. We were lucky enough to be rebranded by a wonderful company by the name of Instrument. And part of what we wanted to do with Bank Black USA is to give people actionable steps to move forward. We saw during anytime there's something happening in government, something bad happening in the Black African descendants of slaves community, African American community, what we saw was an uptick in the back end metrics of our website, where people are looking for something to do, action items. And so as we rebranded our website, as we went through that 13, 14-week kind of excursion, if you will, with the Instrument team, we wanted to have them come to our site, people come to our site, not just to get data. That was good. We want to provide our data in a digestible format, but we want to have them transition into what they actually can do. What steps can you take to get involved? And so what people could do is they could go to our website, and like how you were asking, they can go to the website. They could see what they could do to get involved, how they can begin to take better control of their money, how they could learn about the disparities that are there, and how they could take their money and move their money out of these other institutions that fail their Community Reinvestment Act, their responsibility to their community, and put it in institutions where they can better gain control of their money and have products that are more available to them that will better serve them and their communities. So that's one thing that they could do. But really, I say one of the best things that people also can do is form communities. I don't care if you're part of a running club, a bicycle club, a book club. What you need to do is form community. What you should do is you should really get to a point where you can form some type of group and take away from this conversation so that people, then you could spread the news, if you will. And so sharing information is critical. And so that's also very important, so people can start adopting and getting to understand what this is. Have a meetup, and get civically engaged. And once you do that, you'll see and begin to network with other people who have the same vision as you and want to see things prosper. Unfortunately, people are so inundated with work. They're so inundated with all these things. It's difficult. But I think when people learn the value of community and they learn the value of coming together and empowering themselves, then they can see the value in that change and what that looks like and what that feels like. And then they'll be driven to inclined to more action down those avenues.
Yeah. And that's why, that's why I love this medium, mediums like this with the podcast, right? It's something you can take with you. People can, just have going on in the background or just listen to while they're, working out or whatever, right? The podcast thing has been, blown up for the last, 10 years. We've changed how we interact with a lot of, and so, how they kind of get this information, when they can get it, this kind of on demand is just kind of what I love about this. So we can take things like this and look, we're going to do, C3 Squad members and Ebony Ascent members, like we are going to do more podcasts like this, and not even podcasts, but really kind of break off into more like individual like series on this. We dive deep into all of it, right? The fundamentals, breaking it down, what this stuff is. So be on the lookout for that, because it's I love it. I nerd out about it and I love it, but I want people also to like, who don't necessarily want to like nerd out about it, but to still have that understanding of it, right? Really taking it and going, okay, we're going to take all this, dive deep into technical talking and bring it into like real world stuff that you can kind of understand. So, we're kind of up on time, man. John, I appreciate you coming out. So we're gonna end this segment, the same segment we always do. It's the world famous last sip, and I end every single podcast with the same question. And real quick shout out or real quick break for all those. Look, y'all, it was 10 o'clock in the morning when we started this. Ain't nobody drinking this freaking early. Okay, it's on Tuesday. I still got a full day of work to do. So I promise y'all we will start to bring back the more of the cocktails and stuff like that as I work on the scheduling. But the last sip. The question I ask everybody, John, is what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, my legacy. I want people to realize that my legacy is where I occupied a space for a certain particular time, And I tried to make that space, not on a grandioso scale, just that small space that I occupied. I want people who knew me very well and very intimately to know that I tried my best to improve that space that I occupied. And that's very very meaningful to me. I'm very deliberate and intentional about working where I'm at, not trying to get someplace to do something more on a grandioso scale. I know the Creator has placed me in a particular place in a particular time. And I've come to realize that through some hard trials. And so I want my legacy to be known that during that short period of time I existed on earth, that I tried my very hardest and I was very intentional. People say, man, that guy, he was always on his grind in that particular space. He was there. He meant, his yeses meant yes and his no's meant no. And he tried his best to improve that space to where he existed while he existed there. So that's what I want my legacy to be.
Man, dude, that's powerful, man. You dropped the gem on me. That's like just where you are now and like owning that, right? Instead of being so focused on, you know, how can something be bigger and go. Because I'll be honest, right? That's probably one of those areas people never say, my strength and weakness, right? Like I have the ability to look at something and go, okay, this could be big. Here's how you can scale it. Yeah. But in doing that, sometimes I take my eye off of like what's needed right here, right now. What's the work that can be done here. So, man, dude, I appreciate you sharing that. That hit me today, man. I took something from that today.
Yeah, man. I hope that touches. I'm glad that touched you. I hope it touches someone else to be as proactive in the space where you're at. Don't look for the quantity. Just look for the quality of where you're at, and believe and trust that where you're at right now is where you're supposed to be. Stay positive, stay encouraged, look to empower the people that are around you, and you'll find great value and great accomplishment and great pride in doing just that. So yeah, that's all I got today, man.
We're gonna end it on that, man. So C3 Squad don't know what it is until the next cocktail, to the next conversation. Y'all stay safe out there.